switch the mode. Hopefully it'll get to 72 degrees.
Oh, or something a little warmer is fine.
Yeah.
Can I give this to someone else for my
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Don't give up, Chelsea. Alright. Hey, look, recording devices. Alright, cool. Oh, this fun again. Jesus, really? Joy. Let me find Nuke. Here. See. Because go. Ow. Nice. Fuck, man. Fucking lunch. This fucking piece of shit. Fuck off. Why are you not fucking launching, you piece of shit app?
You can go to program file, you can find over there.
Program?
Program files. Over there in the C drive.
Right.
You gotta like manually type out this thing.
See, it sees it, and it won't fucking take it. Because Windows fucking 10. It's only here. My home fucking box I have 10. I don't know why. It's a fucking piece of dog shit here.
If you I just had the same issue. If you open up Nuke and you pin it to the taskbar first.
Yeah, well, I
and
need to
then,
find Nuke and launch it first, right?
it's in program files. And then under Nuke, just hit N.
Yellow P.
Yeah, and it's inside there. It's 11.2.
This
Yeah,
guy.
yeah.
I want.
That one.
Is there an X
Where
executed?
is it application type? To
Yeah, but
Yeah.
is there X though? I want
But,
X.
after you open that, if you pin it down there, then you can manually add the dash X and the M to
Huh.
force it to open.
Fucking piece of shit. Icon. Alright, well. So, launchable.
Yeah. Okay, and then right click that and pin it there. And then close new.
Okay, it's fine.
And then right click. That right click on the new. Right click properties. Yeah.
Here,
Right click that.
here, properties.
And then at the end of that, space dash new guys. At the top one, the target.
This one here?
Yep.
Target. Add an X, right?
No, all the way to the end.
After executable?
Yeah, after execute.
Really?
Yeah.
Here?
And then space dash new guys. All small letters. Yep. And then hit OK. Oh, hit apply. Yeah.
Alright,
And then should be opening Nugex now. Yeah.
Joy, thanks. Fuck. Come on, fucker. Why are you so fucking... Why? What the fuck is your fucking problem? What the fuck is your problem? This is great. Oh my fucking god, why are you so fucking slow? What the fuck is its problem? What the fuck, man? It's a great day. Today's fucking awesome. Alright. Just gonna start from scratch because this is fucking killing me. This. Okay, so we are going to start with a hello. Most of you have had, I think all of you have had an intro class. Of course, you know, starting with the first day and rebuilds and re-ghosting and all that fun shit. But yeah, so today we're going to jump right into a 3D projection, kind of an environment projection in 3D. And kind of broaden our skills on some more difficult keying. So the first kind of third of the class will be a little bit more hardcore 2D and keying, whatnot, and then with a little bit of 3D and stuff, and then more and more multi-pass CG and full 3D projections and environment rebuilds and all that fun stuff. So today we're going to end up with a girl on a ribbon, right? So we've got and it's performing ridiculously slow, don't know why, but we're going to talk about different techniques and things when we deal with motion blur. Right, so motion blur and some kind of trickier than you would expect color. So we are blessed with a nice evenly lit green screen, maybe a little bit bright, but all things considered, it's still pretty great. However, there's this notion of spill. So you're going to see a little bit of the reflectance of her skin tone picking up a little bit of green color. And you're also going to see, obviously, some motion blurred edges whipping. Motion blur is tricky because it always looks weird, because it is. I mean, photographically, her foot becomes a weird motion blurred clubbish edge. And of course, this is because the shutter is open long enough to get a blurred image during fast motion, right, for standard motion blur. So we'll deal with a softer key and splitting that in, some green spill suppression and some suppression techniques. In this case, I'm going to use D-Spill Madness. So there's a good gizmo that helps us immensely, and that is D-Spill Madness. So that, for this particular one, is a good go-to. There are a couple of crazy lens flares. And I'm not a huge fan of lens flares, but hey, they exist and we do them. And this is a good case for them. It's going to be kind of slow to build this, but there's my lens flare. This one's not crazy over the top. There are a number of crazy over the top ones. Of course, Nuke has optical flares, so if you're into that whole video Copilot over the top anamorphic aesthetic, it is available for a Nuke. These that I have here online, there's a couple of options here. They get kind of heavy, however, they are available for free. These are gizmos that have been built by pipeline guys and artists around the world of visual effects, although they're ridiculously heavy. So save this for the last. Obviously, I'll probably demo with just the default lens flare node, which is also a good starting point, but it just needs a lot of work to get something decent. So with this technique of keying, I'm going to do a technique that's going to split the alpha channel separate from the color channel. So the alpha channel will be handled on this branch here, and the color channel will be handled on this branch here. So in general, again, we're going to talk about differences between hue correct and Dispel Madness for color processing, and then splitting multiple keys together to get a nice, super soft alpha channel. Okay, especially during the motion blurred moments, right? Super soft and motion blurred edges, something like that, right? So a bit of a challenge. Both these pipes, alpha and color, come together with a copy. Alpha and color together again, and of course a pre-multiplication. And of course we get our skin really as neutral as possible, even under the situations of green spill suppression. So obviously this is a backlight example. There's a lot of case scenario for light wrap. I'll probably talk about the difference between an over and an add mix, and standard comp stuff, edge blur and a lens flare over and regraining the entire image. Okay, so a fun one to start off with. All right, so I already got it open. That's where we're heading. So by default, the resolution of this image is 720 by 548. And there's a giant, strangely stitched background image that we're going to use for a background map. So I'm going to say S for settings and set my globals to 720 by 548, which is down here.
Can you go over how we add your
Gizmos?
no the
Directory.
Oh shit. Okay, so if it's missing or you haven't done it, then yes, let's do that. So step one, they're also under today's lesson, under what I have marked already as M201. For lessons 1, there is a gizmo directory under Red Ribbon. There is the gizmos that you may want to play with for today. There's a couple of Dispel Madness plus a couple of options here for gizmos for anamorphic lens flares and lens flare type gizmos. To create this, if you first find he's sniffing pepper. First find Titan Surf, right? So 2 backsplashes, TITANSRRV, enter. All right, and then we're at class files, instructor files, M, and then at this level I'm going to copy it, and let's see, ease of access right here in the build of Windows 10. Map network drive, paste, M, and finish. So it's going to error out because I already have one, but it should be good for you. So that'll mount as an M directory, and then initiate nuke. Also copy in. Sorry. So regarding the gizmos de jour, that I'm going to have you loosely position in here. Alt E. So you of course exist in Z. I and you also have a .nuke directory. I have a bunch of loosely categorized gizmos at this level here. Okay. So you may want to copy those in at this level. So copy from today's 201 lessons 1 Gizmo directory, Red Ribbon Gizmo, copy and paste into your own .nuke directory. Plus set up your M. Everyone able to find that? Make it work for them? Bless you. Again, note that many of these things are either things that I've created and or are found by Nukepedia. It's a great resource. Right? And or Creative Crash or High-End 2D. Sure. Nuke. Is it? No. There's some Nuke here. Nuke. Is this one? High-End 3D? Nuke, 3D, Nuke, sure. Nuke, there's some options here for different gizmos, etc. Alright, so grab your gizmos and load them. Everyone good so far? So I've reloaded the first image, which is a green prepped background, green screen, and this giant BG plate WP. Okay, so first things first, let's start over here actually. Let's start at 3D World. I want to map this onto a sphere, 1 to 1. Right, so I'm going to say sphere, or go 3D, geometry sphere. Going to make it 10 units, give myself some breathing room. All right. So under universal scale, 10 versus 1. And camera. So some review. Ways to get the camera into 3D are threefold. One is the old school legacy import CHAN file. Found here, import and export CHAN file. Second, and probably more pertinent to you as a Maya user, passing camera data back and forth, is the read from file here and open a Limbic and or FBX and or OBJ for geometry, right? Now, last but not least, third-party trackers like PFTrack, Synthesize, MatchMover have to play well with other applications. They're going to save out their camera data, geometry locators as a script file, a .nk file, right? So how would you import that? That would be here. I already have an opening script, so I want to say insert comp nodes, or import script, aka they kind of named it. When you actually go inside here, they're like import script is the name when you go to find it, but insert comp nodes is what it's called. Okay, so 3 major ways. In our case today, I believe it's a import CHAN file. Navigate to today's Nuke directory. So lesson 1, Red Ribbon Nuke, 3D data, camera track.chan. And CHAN is just shorthand for channel, data. So it's just an ASCII file describing movement. If I hop into the camera here, the camera 1, and play through, you're going to get a quick preview of what the camera's going to see in 3D world space. Now, the framing is not 100% correct. We have to adjust that, but the camera movement is correct relative to the plate. Okay, so we're good to go with that. So this and all things you're going to have in your 3D engine all need to come together and exist in a scene. So I'm going to tab in a scene file. And the camera pipe, and the geometry plus this image are going to go into it here. If I hop back out and look in my default view, you'll see that I do have a camera in here. I got my 3D engine, right? And last but not least, to get back to 2D, I need what? A scanline render, right? So I'm going to say these are my three default legs of my tripod, right? The camera pipe also has to be attached to this, to the camera. So if I go now and say, look at the output of my 2D image by saying tab, I'll get a quick preview of a very tilted but correctly animated movement. Now, this is just a still and low res at that. However, you can put whatever you want through the 3D camera. You could have running footage that could be water. You could be, anything is going to work in this regard, right? Plus geometry, plus textures. So for me, I'm going to start by saying, okay, this is good, but I really want to frame, and relative. This is being driven by the foreground lighting. The foreground lighting has been lit in a green screen studio, screen left, and currently my sun is, if anything, over on the right. So I want to pan and translate that whole world over. So the sun is on her screen left. Okay, somewhere in this neighborhood. That being said, there's two ways to go about this. One is that I could rotate my sphere and or use an axis to drive this. I'm going to choose to plug an axis into my camera and reorientate my whole camera, right? So is everyone good so far? Anyone having difficulty finding the footage, or we good? Okay, good. Yeah, question.
Where did you get the camera track option?
So it lives under insert this path right here. 201 lesson 1 red ribbon nuke 3D data camera track dot chan. So in your case, more commonly, you're probably going to export an Alembic. Again, the caveat with passing this data back and forth is that every frame has to be baked, right? So camera passing back and forth, you have to export and bake it. There's a pretty handy Python script. I think it's just called Maya to 2, the number 2 nuke, that works pretty well packaging up and exporting that data. If you don't want to go manually through, it kind of automates the process for you and then ask you, what do you want to include passing this out to nuke? Pretty useful. Have anyone tried this yet? Exporting camera back and forth, data-wise? No. If you give it a shot, it's pretty cool. Or you go through it manually. Basically, you just have to say bake animation on your camera. If you Google Maya to nuke, .py. What? Fuck me. Really? How about no? There. Okay, thank you. There's a pretty good, there's some cool video breakdown on how to do it, but you'll find it at a couple different locations. Here it is, basically. You run. It's going to ask you what do you want to include. Then you can select the geometry in question. Here it is in Maya. There's the equivalent in Nuke, and there's Nuke. There it is in your scanline render. So definitely doable. So for us, it's already been baked out. So again, this axis, the idea of an axis is that it's going to be an overall controller for both a single piece of geometry or camera or everything associated with it. What you could do is, as well, if you want another, if you do a transform geo, if you wanted to do like two objects at the same time, transform geometry, you'll notice that it has both a look pipe plus an axis pipe. So this has an axis, and this would have an axis, right? In our case, we're only going to move one axis, 3D. Axis pipe will go to this axis, and then I'm going to take it and rotate my entire camera world over. Right? So I'm going to say position my sun on screen left, tilt down on X, tilt, down, down, down. Give it a little Dutch, a little Z roll. Camera Dutch in here. That might be okay. Yeah. Maybe something like that. Looking at that position relative to this position of sunlight, that could probably work pretty reasonably. Something like that. Alright. Okay, and then to take the cursor off, eventually we're going to defocus this and blur this, but right now it should be pretty good. Drop a grade node down, pump a little gamma, make it a little bit more contrasty. There you go. Okay, everyone have that? Everyone good with that?
What's the top left red node? What is that?
An axis?
Okay.
So 3D, there's axis, geometry shader. Again, I could some pretty cool stuff. Look at, you could also do a look at pipe, so I could also plug in another axis, for example, and do it this way. So axis 3D, and I get a look at, and now it's looking at that. If I hop in here, double click on this guy, it's kind of a good locator to now drive my camera and tell it to forcibly. Now it's going to have the same movement, but it's always going to be focused on this, right? So if you want to do this with lights, you can do it with lights. You can do it with a camera as well.
And how did you enter the camera
In 3D World Space, so it's here. So Nuke is a little tricky and different. Certainly you're like, this is not Maya, right? So if I have nothing loaded and I hop back out to default, which is the same as Maya's perspective, you may or may not see everything out of the gate, right? So, you know, if you're looking at here, you're not going to see everything else because it is kind of linear until you go to this, and in theory, it's kind of like a merge for all 3D objects. Now, it may or may not be quote-unquote active, right? So, you certainly want to double-click on it and load it in the property bin. That's kind of a step one for you to have it loaded. You should, at this point, be able to see it as one of the pull-downs here, camera 1, right? You can also look through things like spotlights, so it shares some similarities with most 3D lighting applications as well. So, but yeah, this will work. So 2D versus 3D. There's also all these default perspectives. There's right side, left side, up, down, top. You know, all the same things work. F to fit, you know, for example, and you can tumble around stuff in that regard. Think of V as like your toggle back in to like a camera mode, your perspective mode, kind of like a camera, you know, and tumble around as we. Now, last semester we should have got you guys up to speed with it being working in Maya. Is that still the case, right? Is everything performing like Maya for you guys? Like tumbling and scaling and middle mouse zoom and middle mouse pan and right mouse dolly in, dolly out, tumble, left mouse with alt modifiers. Sounds like it's all working. Okay, so and there's other things here. You can turn off your grid here. You can also turn on OpenGL lighting. So if you had lighting, you started putting in. Now we are going to get to this. We're going to light a whole. The end of the semester, we're going to light a whole environment. We're also going to do map painting environment projections. We're going to do a bunch of stuff in the 3D engine. But for now, just be able to hop in and out of the camera. And or note that one thing I should mention is this. As I hop between 2D and 3D, so if I hit tab and hit tab, so right now it kind of zooms in right now. Check this out. Click on this button right here and it will lock 1:1 relative to your aspect ratio and gate. So right now you actually see, although it's lower res, you see the exact same framing as you do in 3D that you do as the output of the scanline render, right? So be aware of that. If you want to lock 1:1 to see what your final framing actually will be exactly correct in 3D world space. Okay. Hop back out. That camera would default. Okay, so as I mentioned, frame your shot and then you should be good to go. Okay, so now hopping back over here, let's talk about this. So there is going to be a bit of slash and burn hackery here for this red scarf. I'm gonna do a little roto gag. You can do suppression on it, but it's pretty tricky to get most of the color in there. I'm gonna do some color work to kind of suppress it, and it should be push it a little further. Now, overall, I did load the D-Spill Madness, which is a lovely node for color work. I'll start off with maybe playing around with hue correct. So in general, I want to handle two separate things, the two separate branches separately, right? So one will be alpha and the other will be color. So I'm gonna drop some dots. She's been really like, I need attention all day long today. So here. All right, so one side's gonna be key and one side's gonna be color, right? So color-wise, so I'm going to show you a hue correct. I'm going to show you where it kind of does not completely get us where we want to go. So you could start off with the hue correct, and it's a great node. It has a lot of potential here, but we'll eventually probably switch over to a D-Spill Madness. So I'm using this because it is a pretty good go-to for blue and green suppression. So here's green sup, here's blue suppression. And the green is pretty bright and primary right here in the middle of primary green. Now we need to chase colors that are green, but they're much more in the yellowish portion of the hue range, which is where her skin tones are falling between yellow and a little bit red magenta, right? So, so in this case, I would do something like this. I would say green suppression. Right here are my primaries, and if I start to zing it, you're like, oh, okay, well, it's starting to work. However, the downside of this is that there's this direct relationship between color suppression and luminance that tends to, in this case, with this node, darken at the edges. So I can go super far, so far that I start to break it, right? So again, the color opposite of green is what? Starts with an M, or here's your visualization, magenta, right? So if I go crazy with it, you see it start to ring magenta because I'm kind of overdoing it. And again, this is how it's working. By suppressing it, it's pushing in magenta to kind of balance out green. The problem is I need to broaden it out. So one thing is I need to broaden out to actually get where the skin tones are living. Two, saturation is also a good handmaiden to this one suppression, meaning that as I start to lessen it, it'll do a really good job of lessening the green as well. Now, it's going to start to get dark and gray on the edges. We don't care in the middle of here. It's going to do a pretty good job. What we really need to do is actually broaden out this suppression into the yellow skin tones, right? So I'm going to nudge this guy over with my keypad arrow, and I'm going to nudge my yellow over. You can also add a knot with our friendly neighborhood Rock and Roll Hockey Alt Control, right? So if I grab that, it's going to add. Now, again, how this works in Nuke is the first direction you pull, it's going to constrain. So left, right, and if I want to do up, down, I can't go left, right now, but I can go up, down. If you want to break that relationship, do control, and then you can free form and position it exactly where you want. Now, what we need to do is also in green suppression. No crying. Here, add, and here. Now you start to see it does an okay job, but my edge is starting to get a little bit. She's starting to get a little bit gray in her mids. And I could maybe get there. Problem is, like, if I get it to not get dark at the edges, it kind of brightens up my edges. So that's okay. Hi. It's an okay start, and we'll use it in a treatment like this for the scarf, but let me show you what a better alternative might be, and that's going to be the magic of this hue correct, D-Spill Madness, which is probably the most downloaded gizmo. So here, so we have this on standby. And I want to go all plugins and update. Of course, it's in my own .nuke directory. Come back in here and say, what am I looking for? D for D-Spill Madness. So you can tab it in at this point in time, but you should be able to see it in the pull-down menu here under D-Spill Madness, which is right there. So it's a good node. It's got an alpha input if you want to constrain it by stuff, but basically out of the gate, just like magic, right? Boom. Right? Oh, okay. You know, it guessed right that, 50-50 chance of getting it right between contemporary technology using either green or blue screen. It was set to green, and it's pretty solid out of the gate. Now, the suppression is fantastic, but here is probably my favorite feature of it, and that is the fact that currently it has the ability to center in on the color that you're suppressing with this little button here that says Restore Luminance Detail or Restore Source Luminance. In our case, we really don't want that super bright green screen. We're going to turn that off, and then you're going to get much more sedate edges. Now, we won't be able to tell until we get it in context of the final key, obviously, and her edges. And again, you're going to see that this is a good balance between the quality of your edges, how much opacity you have versus your color suppression treatment. Everything in a key works together as a blend of the final result, right? So, pretty good. Now, I'm kind of ignoring the red bit here, which is a different animal, and both are having a challenge trying to isolate that color. Now, you could go and tell it in hue correct, chase it under red. The downside is her skin tone obviously also has a lot of red. So if I were to say green suppression in red, you're going to start to see her skin get a little bit zapped as well. Okay. And still, I'm not even really getting, I know, everything that I want. So we're going to stay with this, right? We're just going to do a pretty good job of neutralizing just automatically. You can play with fine tuning. It's basically like it will go a little bit more magenta. It will go a little bit more green if you do need to tweak it. But for the most part, the default is actually fantastic. The one thing you could also do is, even though I turn this off, you can actually go back in and tweak and add a little bit back and forth. And this is going to be fantastic because you could say, like, if your dead edges are reading a little dark or a little bright, you can either bump a little bit of gamma and or offset into either of them, as well as saturation, increase or decrease, right? So all really good stuff. Okay, so I'm going to sit on this one for a sec, and then next I kind of want to eyeball some red work here, and I'm going to I'll try a hue correct on top of this, and let's see if I get any mileage out of it. Probably not. Hue correct. And I'm going to say a green suppression, but it's going to be in the reds to yellows. I'm going to say here, and then here, here. You start to see it here. Saturation. It's helping a little bit. Starting to get her skin tones though. See it hitting her skin tones, so we don't like that. So we're gonna roto this. We're gonna roto split it, and I'm also gonna use a color corrector on top of it. So there's a starting point. But let me delineate with a simple roto. And we're gonna have to chase this roto, but you know, that's what we gotta do. So I'm just gonna do a big old soft split here, Z to smooth. Marquee select, Z. E to expand feather. And the good news is a lot of this is going to be, even if it gets close to, getting into her skin tone, we're going to get this side here in a second as well. It'll still do a good job, right? So and I'm going to try, I don't use color corrector a lot, but I'm going to hit it in this case and take a look at it, right? So color corrector, and again, so we're handling our alpha channel differently, right, over here, so we're not even dealing with alpha channel unpremolts and all that fun stuff quite yet. The color corrector. So right now I'm going to say test on. And again, shadows, mid-tones, and highlights. Your highlights are going to live in these grays. So I could say, turn this off, and go highlights and gamma, or maybe midtones. Maybe we'll hit midtones. There we go. Gamma down a little bit, and I'm gonna green up. Just a little bit. So I'm gonna say here, our gain in the midtones. Push a little bit more magenta. So maybe that's enough, right? So disable it before and after. Right? We'll brighten it a little bit. And oh, I did luminance, that's why. Take my luminance in my green screen. That's not what I was hitting. I wanted saturation. Saturation in of green in the red. So saturation of the red is going to be fine. Green. Green, saturation down. Yellow. That's pretty neutral. That's not bad. I've shifted it, tweaked it, and you get that ringing edge is going to fall back into a more acceptable, especially when we're backlighting it, it's going to be pretty decent. So I'm going to start with that as a good starting point, and I'm going to chase this roto around a bit here, turn this on. Of course, I have my camera loaded, so I'm going to take my own advice, which I tell you guys to do all the time, and that is to put your toys away, kid, because I'm going to tell that to myself, because currently, why? I want a roto, but what do I have fighting me? The fact that my camera's still loaded. I've got all this shit already loaded. I haven't put anything away, right? My camera has a keyframe on every frame. Can I see my unique keyframes for my roto? Hell no. So check out this hotkey. Control. Control X is going to blow away everything except for what you are currently dealing with, and that is this one frame. So I'm going to give it a little nudge. It's going to drop at first keyframe right here. I'm going to chase this around a little bit more. Oops. Here. And I'm going to take some relaxing animation type moments here. So here. And of course, you could be as perfect as you need to be, but if this were a shot for final, you'd be a little bit more accurate. Take advantage of rotating your edges. over. This guy over. Up a bit. And I'm going to rotate and chase this around for the swing. So, take a few moments to get this in a good ballpark here. I'm going to have a stationary rope that's going to deal with the top hanger. Swing that guy around. Here, 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 to here. Okay, so there's my one edge. And then I'm going to have this other guy in here. Another roto. We can do it in the same node. Z and E. Close this guy out, turn this guy on. So this is going to work pretty swell out of the get-go. Okay, so in general, her skin tones are super neutral. I've got the ringing edge out of that scarf with a little bit of roto here. And we're in pretty good shape to start this out for color. Now, obviously, we're gonna need to really drastically push color to make her feel like she's a day exterior, but that's gonna come later. So I'm gonna drop down a grade node. I'm gonna let you guys work on this for a couple more minutes. Then this grade node will come in to kind of set her into this darker, more sunsetty background. Yes.
Can I have your help?
Yeah.
I can't find the plug-in. It's there.
Okay. Sure. Chelsea, let's go figure it out.
I was doing the roto. I just can't find the D-spill.
Did you? Okay. So is it in your Nuke extract? So what did you do? All the plugins and update?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
And then go back in, and then see it. So let's check.
I had to copy it from.
Yeah, from today's directory. So here. These ones, yes.
Oh, okay. And then I copy it into my own.
Yeah, and then I'll help you because your Nuke has to open it at the time you create it. And actually, not just there. You can copy it there, but also to source it, it needs to be in your own BlessU.Nuke directory. So go to Z, which is U unknown, right? And then see that .Nuke at the top, a hidden file. So paste it in. Yep. Now go here, and then go new comp. And then we're gonna do the same process here and copy it from what you got plug in here and put it into the next one. Alright, so we'll do all plugins and update. Go back in. And in theory you could tab it in, it should show up, but you should see, yep, down to this one.
Okay.
And then copy that, Control C,
Oh, and I could put
and
it
paste it.
in.
Now, the next time you open it, it will be available to you, but
Right, but just because
yeah,
it's
because
okay.
you just
Okay.
now plug it in and it should work pretty
Okay.
fantastic. This slide, just drag it over, and
Okay, it's gonna
it'll
put it
snap
in.
right in. Boom, look at that.
Ah, okay.
Done.
Got it. Thank you.
Sweet. Or real quick.
Yeah.
Can you run through that copy paste thing we used?
Yeah, let me do it for the whole class one more time. But so here in Nuke, your quote unquote gizmo or plugins, right, have to live under your .Nuke directory. So there's a couple things. All your preferences get saved there, and if you really want to be more specific about it, you would have a menu.py or that would tell what things you're loading. You will also note that this is a not default Nuke, so this is an installed gizmo Cryptomat, which is awesome, right? So, this is a third-party PSYOP plugin, which is pretty rad. Basically, it's like a infinite ID mats of awesomeness. But how we grab these gizmos, like I was showing you, from places like Nukepedia. Hey, look, D-Spill Madness right there. You want to put them in your own .Nuke directory. So check this out. A couple things. One thing is that anything with a dot in it, especially in Linux and or unless it's explicitly shown, is that the dot represents being a hidden file, right? So a dot or a dot, unless you override it and say show me hidden files, you will not see it, right? So when we go to actually publish gizmos, you won't see it until you push a dot, and you're like, oh, okay, here's my .gizmo directory. Now here's where, and then so for me, here's my home, here's my .Nuke directory. I've got a bunch of loose gizmos in here under this .Nuke directory. There's also things like hero autosaves, my node presets, tool sets, workspaces, how I like to set up stuff as a workspace. All this stuff gets copied and saved here, as well as your preferences. You know, like, hey, I would like my auto key to be framed to be off for rotos. All that kind of stuff exists in here as well. So this is where you want to copy any of these gizmos that you either create yourself and or download, right? So I have mine for today. I copied them in today's shot directory for lesson 1 red ribbon gizmos. And I've got these three guys here, D-Spill Madness, Flare Factory, the K Lens Engine, and this one would be open as a script file. See if this thing opens. It's heavy as all crap, but it's a script that shows you how to build ridiculous over-the-top anamorphic lens flares. So if you want that, if you want to do like J.J. Abrams action, all this is basically driving that. Open this script. But again, so go ahead the process and copy these guys here into your own .nuke directory under Z. That make sense? You able to find it? Z.nuke, and then just copy paste. And then anything you find here, what are you guys interested in? Download gizmos. These gizmos are great. Particle system. You ever want an environment to have birds? Look, P-bird, particle birds right here. Pretty awesome. Falling leaves. Check that out, right? Clouds, procedural clouds in Nuke. Pretty cool setups. Filters, 132 different published filters. All right, and then again, all these are just most are all are compatible. Glows, auto flares, pro mist, bloom effects. Jump to 8. There's a bunch. Chromatic motion blur. That sounds kind of fun to play with. Eye blur, height to normal. There's a lot of things for processing killer hot pixels. Nice. Sensor clean, silk, simple bokeh. There's a lot. Tangent space normals utility. All are available, and you can just plug them into your .nuke directory. The thing is, it has to be in there before you open it up. It kind of goes, hey, what's in my source directories? What do I include when you open this up? So now you should be able to, like, if I go in and grab, Flare Factory. So I've already set it to update. So if I hit FLA, here it is, Flare Factory. And somewhere ridiculously slow, a Flare Factory is dropped into here. Now, slow as all hell, but it's good. I mean, it's got a lot of stuff going on in it. It'll take forever to take a look at it, but here. But yeah, this is lens schmutz. Let's see. I put this in position. The default is a boring as all hell moonish looking thing, but if I go check out, the names are my favorite. Anyone want the Abrams squared configure? Right? Subtle. That one's subtle as all hell. Or the names are great. Fringe event. Or cat eye. Alright, so they're pretty cool. And there's a shit ton of play. You can turn, if it's like, yeah, it's way over the top, well, you can kind of turn off and on all the stuff inside of here, and it works pretty well. Like, enable or disable lens pieces, anomalies, disable, cores, enable, disable, lighting dynamics, flicker, shimmer, animation, different seeds, and a lot of stuff going on and a lot of stuff to play around with. So for now, tell it to go away. All right. And then, as I mentioned also, which I actually do own a legit copy of, optical flares for Nuke. So if you're into that whole, got to have my After Effects over the top shit. Now, that being said, the implementation actually is great in Nuke, meaning that you can bring it in the 3D engine and parent it to every light in your scene. And when I had to do this for a Fox campaign for every freaking team in the NBA, and of course it's like lens flare central, so it's CG, complete CG stadium, and cameras start tilting down through the stadium, and you want to see lens flares. It's sports, it's ESPN, it's Fox, it's all that stuff, So lots of lens flares. It's great. You just set them up and parent them to each light, and everyone gets generated its own lens flare, which is great. Okay.
Just looking at the D-spill.
You put it in there?
Yeah.
Now, so as I mentioned, if you open it right now without, if you just go to new comp and try it now. So new comp, check this out. And then all plugins and update. Okay. And then at this point, if I say de-spill, there it is, de-spill madness. And just copy and paste it from that script to your already open script. So all plugins and update. Open a new iteration of Nuke after you copy it into it. All plugins and update, and then you'll find it. We're all good now? Working? All right. So, let's talk key. So over here on the side, I'm going to start to work with a key here. I'm going to do a Primat by default. You'll notice that the contextual typing got better for finding every letter known to man, which is pretty cool. So by default, so a little refresher on this. By default, like many keys, they all are predicated with at least one first initial scrub. Now, Primat is, of course, a multiple scrub consecutive keyer. So you're going to add multiple keys to this result. So this is my first selection right now. I'm going to hit A for alpha channel. And I'm currently just holding and scrubbing continuously to kind of see the first result. And I think I pissed it off. Let's see if it comes back. Baby, come back. There we go. Bless you. All right, so here's the first default starting. Now, you actually can try auto compute after that, and you might get some mileage out of it, or maybe not. Right? But in general, it's always going to be a process of what? From here, either clean background noise or foreground noise. So I'm going to say BG noise next, and sample only the areas that need to be cleaned. And you'll also note that there are, very hard to read, but there are on the screen left, see that right there? There's a tracker mark on a stand. If you gamma and gain down a bit, you'll actually see it. Right here for tracker marks are that, little, right there on the ragged edge. And you also see some little paint fix. So in that case, we're seeing it here, the markers. This is the one case where I'm going to actually utilize this crop feature and knock it out. So now I need to stealthily add a bit more foreground noise cleanup. Looking pretty good. Now there's going to be some slight transparent edges, which are in fact based on the fact that what? There's some green spill hitting her edges. So the software thinks, okay, well, you must want that transparent, right? No. Okay. So we're going to tell it there's because it's spill, right? As we just mentioned. There is matte sponge to deal with spill, and there's spill sponge. Spill sponge is for processing the color RGB channel. Matte sponge is for filling in holes of areas in your matte that are due to spill, which in this case it would be. So I'd say matte sponge and select that area. Select that area. I'm going to scrub through and see if it took care of some of the other ones. There's a little bit right here, which is also, if I go back to here and here, due to spill. So I'm going to matte sponge it. And you'll see that it's a pretty reasonable key to pull. Now, most of it's fine. It's just we need to split this difference back and forth. Keying is interesting because it's like solid textures are easy to get. Wardrobe's easy to get. Hair is really hard because it's basically semi-transparent. It has to be the lightest key you could possibly pull, right? Motion blur is the same phenomenon, right? Motion blur should have partially thin edges, very soft, feathery motion blurred edges. So in this case, it's a little bit too much information it's holding on to, right? And again, you look at the original image, okay, I get it, right? So here's the original, here's currently what my alpha channel is holding on to. So we'll try and get this better, right? So the cool thing is we could cheat it. We can literally come in and say, I want to split in key mix in unique keys for hair, separate from body, separate from motion blur, and really just finesse every edge, which a lot of times we'll end up doing, you know. So this is a good starting point, right? Again, this is all about alpha. And then this side over here is all about color. So at this point, I'm just going to give an obligatory erode filter, right, hitting alpha, and an obligatory single pixel of blur, also hitting alpha, 1 pixel. So 1 pixel of a dilate erode, 1 pixel of a blur. All right. So again, what is this doing? It's squeezing and softening your alpha channel by a pixel. And there's some buggery up on the very top of frame, but again, this is pretty full app, so it wouldn't be in projection. Then I'm going to say, again, combine these two together with a copy, right? So I got one whole channel. This is all about alpha channel. This is all about color. So this is kind of confusing, so I'm going to just drop down a shuffle. Follow me along with this guy. And a couple things I'm going to do. I'm going to say shuffle and say alpha, 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 right? Tossing away my color information, tossing away my red, green, blue color, and here. Now I'm also going to say this side over here is all about alpha, right? So I'm on my dot, and you don't have to do this, but you know, for visual aids, I'm going to do this. A couple returns here. Maybe even make it white. Look at this, making my script all sexy. There, and then over here, I'm going to say this side over here is RGB. Okay, same stuff. Down a couple times here, bold. Maybe give it some color. Why not? Zoom out here. One side's color, one side's RGB color, and the other side is alpha. That. Sure. And also, check this out, Alt-P, I'll postage stamp it so you can see this side is all about alpha, this side's all about color. Alright, so now I'm going to combine these two together with a copy. I'm going to say, the default of a copy, hotkey K, will work fantastically, right? Because I'm going to say from this is from what I'm going to copy, shift select that, hotkey K to copy the two branches back together. So from A to B, what's the action? To copy. And what channel is being copied by default? Alpha to alpha. So I'm good to go, actually. Alpha and color are back together again. Kill. And I'm off and running here. The next thing I need to do is what? A pre-mult result. Looks pretty good, I think, out of the gate. Everyone good? Anyone having problems? All right, let's kind of see where we're at by combining or merging these guys back together. I'm going to say this over that. So this, shift select that. And we're going to start off by simply merging it. Okay, so I see like right out of the gate that my edges are really dark, yeah? So again, we're gonna go with this back and forth between how color is affecting it versus alpha channel, right? So I'm turning off and on. Let's turn off everything for a second. Here it is. Here's everything off. Here's everything on. So D-spill madness. If I go back in here and bump gamma up, check that out. Right, so in my case, I mean your case could be different, but pop this up a little bit. Here, erode 0. Erode, so now I'm going to say erode maybe minus 5 pixels, and then here's what's offering here. That's beneficial, right? So that's going to help. Shells. All right, so kind of see where you're at the get-go. So the other thing is, of course, her overall lighting is obviously very studio lit, and it has a nice lighting ratio, but it definitely needs to be a little bit more warm, needs to be more contrasty, it needs to be dynamically stretched to feel like it would be in a day exterior situation. So let's work on that. I dropped down a grade node already. I want to do something like gamma down, and you're going to start to see her center core, her midtones darken a bit. I'm going to go and warm her up a bit in her highlights, so gain and warm her up a little bit. And then in a white point, if I start to drop it a bit, you're going to start to see the whole dynamic range get a lot more punchy, right? Something like that, maybe. So before and after. Okay, that's better. Better. So a little grade node to push her color into this warmer realm in which she lives. Got my D-spill and my green suppression going on. D-spill and my edge suppression, my scarf suppression. Okay, so from here, one thing that's always going to help is a little bit of light wrap, or edge blur, I should say. So her edges are a little bit pixelated, right? And note that the light wrap needs to affect the alpha channel. So right now I'm going to do it either here. You can do it before or after. But if I did it afterwards, I would need to turn off the original alpha channel that's being generated from this background. But, so I'm going to do it here. I'm going to say edge blur. And by default, it's going to find the alpha channel edge. 3 pixels is way too much, right? Maybe 1.35 pixels. But let's take a look. With and without. Definitely nicer, softer. The thing that really kind of is going to be to your benefit is that in addition to this softening, you could actually push a little bit of brightness back into it as well. Right? So a little bit of softness, a little bit of color brightness right there at the edge. So that's going to help soften that transition. Now there's some, let's go look at those extreme motion blurred moments here. This is not bad, but we could have a way softer edge. Like I'm getting away with this right now, but it could be way softer. You always want to kind of compare it against the original plate in terms of softness. And there's a little bit more of a softer edge in her hair for sure. And perhaps at the edge of this leg. So I'm going to show you a couple techniques to split in way softer keys, right? So this is a good frame to R&D on. Got some nice motion blurred edges, and you can kind of do this infinitely. You want to, kind of just continue to split out little bits and pieces of the key. So I'm going to branch off another keyer here, and we're going to try a different one. We're going to try a key light for hair. Key light. Okay, so first one was a very simple Primat. This new one will be a key light. Give myself the room to work. All right, all these keyers have certain strengths and weaknesses, and have different things they like to do and get different results. So in our case, I'm going to do again the key light's similar but different, right? So it starts off exactly the same, and that we always want to start by doing an initial screen selection for this color. So I'm going to go ahead and sample. And this one's a recursive keyer, right? And that means what? That means that it will spastically freak out on you, right, as you're trying to sample. You can magically get it, but it's probably the way to kind of work with this a little bit better would be to do it as follows. Split on the horizontal, create a brand new comp viewer. Drag one to the other side, make sure you fill the entire pane, and then attach number 2 to maybe the actual raw plate, and then just sample off of this, and now you could in real time see the results as you continually key over here. So I'm going to start, again, we're really not trying to get the whole world. We're actually just trying to get a good, solid start that just so happens that it's going to have a nice feathered edge. Right? So maybe in here. Yeah, that's pretty good. So I'm going to compare and contrast these two keyers without any filtering. Bless you. And you see how they're different, right? That's Primat. This is key light. See how it like has that nice automatic softer. Let me bump my gamma down a little bit as well. Softer and broader fall off of those soft edges. So at the gate, it's doing something a little bit different and perhaps a little bit better for hair at least. Okay, So I'm starting there. Now the rest, rather than adding consecutive samples, the rest of this is about balancing out your result, right? So you've got screen gain and screen balance. Those are where you're going to get a lot of mileage out of. These first two, they're basically thresholds, right? So you want to increase or decrease your screen gain. And in our case, I'm just going to kind of scrub through the entire moment here. Right in there. And also screen balance. So balance is going to bring back a little bit more opacity in semi-transparent areas. It's looking pretty good. So softer hair result. That's prime matte. Notice the harsh roll-off edge, and there's key light. It's got super soft, right? Now, other things you want to get a little bit more mileage out of it. Screen matte, M-A-T-T-E, is basically like a color corrector for the alpha channel. So black point, white point. So this should be black point, white point of a grade node, right? Roll-off, more of a contrast roll-off, right? Dilated road, softness is blur, and then despeckle is for noise in your result, right? You could, so if I really want to chase, I really don't have to chase much because what I have is good. Like if I wanted to retain her skin tone, which is going here a little bit, I would do something like white clip and slowly decrease it until that filled and it'd be good to go, right? Now, the trade-off is what? Her hair just got a little bit harsher. Let me go take it back and you'll see like that nice soft edge is getting a little bit more blocked up, right? As I chase this hair. So maybe I'll nudge it just a tiny bit. And I'm really just gonna roto split in her hair result and perhaps this leg whip, super feathered leg whip here as well. So let's compare that as well. Check out how Prime Matte's a more aggressive keyer. It's good to key hard things, like things are difficult to key, I should say. But look how soft and that feathered edge is of this key light. It's fantastic for like motion blur and things like that. Might not get hard things easy, but in this case it's going to work for us pretty well. Both hair and perhaps motion blur as well. So I could go with that. So check this out. How am I going to combine these two together? A key mix, I should say, sorry. So this one's good to go. This one's separate. I want to combine them together. I'm going to use a node called key mix. Okay. So what this is going to do is basically split two results together with a third input mask, right? So I'm going to say this versus that. And what's going to determine the split is this roto mask input. So I'm going to delineate our character's head. And then to see if it's right, there it is. Yeah, so softer. And I'm going to Z to smooth it. E to expand feather. And again, I just want to take just the soft head. So let's check this out. It's a pretty good whipped frame right there. Here's my result. A for alpha channel. Oh, look at that right there. Right there. And then if I disable it now, world of difference, right? Here's the before with a little bit dark, pulling in too much information. That's much better. In fact, I'm going to softly split it even a little bit more. Yeah, look at that. See that? Amazing, right? Nice soft result. And I'm going to chase this edge around, certainly during the whip moments of it. The cool thing it also has is the ability to mix this off. So when you don't need it, we can just animate this and say go away. Right? But it's going to give you a way different result. In our case, it's going to be fantastic for what we're trying to achieve. Retain soft, feathery motion blur. All right, so I'm going to chase this edge around a little bit. Nice, soft, feathery motion blur. Super nice little whip there going on. It's pretty good. Rotate. Now, you know, up in here, I don't know, it could be a trade-off whether or not you need it. Enable, disable. It's about the same, so you can enable or disable. I'm going to leave it as is. Back down. So there's your difference right there, which is fantastic. Nice, super soft edge, big feathery moment there. Digging it. Global. And then certainly by the end, you can either take it or leave it. In my case, I think it's going to hold up pretty well because I got a pretty decent key regardless. Yeah. So here, spacebar, H to fit. So I'm going to do a similar treatment on her leg, but her hair is certainly looking better. Big, soft, semi-transparent. I'm also going to defocus this background now, and you're going to see that it will help to pop her off this background to separate it. Take care of some of the pixelation as well. Just a little defocus overall here. Defocus filter. Before and after, yeah, definitely help. So I'm going to do the same thing for her leg. I'm going to chase this, or add a roto to split in some nice motion blur, especially right there at the beginning of the shot. So let's see what we got here. Here. Right there. So if I add another key mixed roto, I'm going to add one on top of it here. And grab her leg. See how soft that result is now? Z and E to feather it. So before and after. So super soft, right? You get the nice motion blurred edge. This guy go here and chase this around for a couple frames. rotate.
Why did you add like a new roto node instead of just adding a second Bezier like roto?
Either or will work. Even though you can do it in the same node, I just like the clarity of adding multiple. Either one will work. Nice and soft result. So you're gonna find that there's a number of different, people can work in a number of different ways, and there's no, just preference. There's no big difference one way or the other. Oh yeah, look at that. And frame 1, roto, select. Wait, where is that? Here, here, here. Select this, and this can be turned off by now. Just gonna opacity turn it off until I need it right here. So I'm going to turn it off. And by here it's on. There you go. Okay, so now the whipping leg is nice and soft. Their hair is super soft and feathery. So I'm good with my 2 keys. I'm going to go ahead and blow away this pane. Close pane, right mouse click. Go full screen. So, we're at a pretty good place here. You'd want to go through and play around with the contribution of how bright or dark your edges are. I'm going to bump my gamma up a bit. So now I have super soft edges. That helped. Alright, so that's pretty good for my edges, and then make sure things like your edge blur is on and working. That's good. Your color suppression is contributing positive things and not going too dark or too bright. Then if you want to substitute or play around with an option, right now I just have a hard-edged merge. There's this node called add mix that is a great alternate. So let me demo it and see what you think. So again, I recommend pushing it till as far as you can get, and then you're at a good place here where it's like edge softness versus color processing versus the density of your alpha channel at your edge and how feathery it is. And all these things work together in one cohesive whole to kind of get a good, neutral, and appealing result. Once you get it, you're kind of at a pretty good place. This is when I would maybe play around with something like an add mix. And what the name indicates is that it's basically mixing foreground versus background in an additive result at the edge. So add mix merge. So it has an A pipe and a B pipe. So I'm just going to do it right next to my other merge, A versus B. And so here's my original merge. And then by default, it's going to look darker because you have to do one thing, pre-mult the incoming alpha channel. Okay. Once you do that, the default will look exactly the same. At least it should. Right. Merge versus add mix. Okay. Make sure it's pre-multiplied coming in. Now, where the difference is that you have an A pipe and a B pipe, and you have handles. And what the handles are dictating is the contribution of the highest value and the lowest value in background versus foreground. And just basically, I just recommend playing around with it and kind of seeing what happens as you tweak these results. So if your edges are dark, you want to lift this value, right? And see how it's like suddenly got like perfectly super bright and soft. Just, I mean, that subtle little difference right there. Look at that. That's pretty friggin' fantastic, right? Like that little darkening at the edge. Oh, just perfect, right? So again, we're like using every little thing we can do to tweak this even better and better as we go. So play with foreground, background, highs and lows, and again, use your eyes to dictate: is it getting better or worse, right? You know, is this thing helping or hurting? Again, push it as far as you can before you get there, so don't rush it. You know, keep working on your key until you really get it to a place that you're feeling pretty good about, and then push it that extra little level, and that's nice right there. Look at that, nice little final contribution here. Is everyone getting this? I know I'm moving maybe a little bit too fast, but working for you people? Yeah. Yeah, take a look at it. So I'm going to give you a chance to play with this a little bit. It's going to take a little finesse back and forth. I'll come around and help you guys. From here, we're going to do all the tech stuff like regraining it, light wrap because she's backlit, and then to drive this lens flare gag, I'm going to introduce you to a node called the Reconcile 3D node. So what this does is it's basically like if you're going to track an object in 2D, you've got 3D data solved already for you, right? So basically you say put an axis out in proper Z space, and as it calculates it, basically it's going to give you 2D data as though it was a 2D track, right? Because we're going to need that to link to our lens flare. Let this guy flip for a little bit here. It's looking pretty good. Pretty decent for a quick key. Nice soft edges. Maybe battle her, go in and maybe battle her scarf a little bit more, but I think the rest is pretty decent. Great, Jules. Picture shot. So keep in mind that, even though the color looks all whack, keep in mind that it's only alpha channel. That's your character, right? Yeah, so the magic that solves this thing is the power of this one button in D-Spill Madness, and that is Restore Luminance. Take that off. Check that shit out, right? Magically better. Now, Your feet are a little dark, but you might want to. So again, it's this whole balance of like, and I can kind of see here. You kind of get a. If it's based on that, it might be a bit of a dirty key, but it's based on how much transparency it should do. So it'd be very thin pull, but very soft edges, because you're not going to pull in that that backing, that green screen backing. So it's this whole balance at this point in time. But that one button is what solves much of the problem. So just go back and forth between a softer key pull for her foot, or is it the suppression overall, and adjust all those things. Yes. So that's what I showed off, which was most of you were hitting 1 and hit A. So it literally is, it's not artifacting as much as it is the red tracking marks. And the simple fix is to take the crop right here and choke it in just past it. Yep. Done. That's it. You can up there, but you know, it's alright, they're recognition. Realistically, here's the deal. It's what we call a full aperture. So check the shot out. This shot is basically a quarter res version of full app film. So if I go ESRA settings, our default has always been full app 35, super 35 full app, which is a very boxy result, right? So check this out. Hey dog. Reformat. Super 35, and if I throw a checkerboard on after this, this is what the aspect ratio is. So checkerboard. So, of this and giant box of film, back in the day when we shot film, you would extract only 185. That is your projection, right? So you're never intended to see this top third, or what is it, like a quarter of the image or bottom of the image, right? This is actually what's projected. Only old school NTSC boxy 3x4 TVs would be this aspect ratio. This is your default 185 aspect ratio, and again, the other option would be that we see Super 35, 235. So this for quote unquote CinemaScope or wide angle results. Hey dog. Why I'm saying that is because this is a full aperture. Let me turn this off. See how you're seeing this at the top? This is literally the edge of a film gate. Right? That right there is not an artifact. It's literally the edges of the film gate, because you're seeing the entire scan, right? You're seeing so what's intended to be seen by the audience is ultimately, and I was just doing this at home before I came, let's go half. That's probably your actual framing right there. So you would never see anything else. It'd be probably framed again, probably about there. So yeah, don't worry about that. You'd see this little bugger, and that right there is literally just a tracker mark. So that's what choke that thing in here. Again, don't worry about the top bits at all, right? Because that's your final image. And this is still true today. You can shoot digital with a lot of overscan image, right, that doesn't get seen. And for visual effects, we love that because it's good real estate to kind of pull from for fixing things, for repairing things, for shorthand jargon, repoing things, repositioning shots over time. If you're locked one-to-one to it, you don't get that luxury, right? But in essence, this is most likely the actual framing of what would be seen on a movie screen here. What we like to call letterbox. This is what most default images would look like, or 185. 177 is basically your 16:9 aspect ratio, what we see in our high-def TVs now. So it's about 185 or 177 to be more accurate. So again, that top and bottom kind of gets lost. So don't worry about. You could roto it out, but whatever. It's not intended to be seen, I should say. Put it that way. This versus that. Okay, it's 6 o'clock, top of the hour. Anyone want a break? Let's take a break. All right. Stretch your legs a little bit. For about 10 minutes, then we'll come back in here and kind of move forward with the grain, edge wrap, demo the blur, the flare, and all that fun stuff. And entertain the dog for a little bit. What is this? What is this? Out. Out.
You got lost.
Yeah. Very lost. I didn't even get my camera in the right position. Like I have well, I can do this term. It's fucking rigging.
So far.
Scripting. I had 2 classes and then technical.
Wait, you guys scripting?
Yeah.
You did? Scripting is fun. What other
James is always helping me.
what other technical classes?
Oh no, yeah. This
Yeah,
is like
reading,
man kind of technical.
Advanced and scripting. Those aren't technical.
No. Oh yeah, those are the technical ones.
Technical.
And then we have skin texturing, creature modeling.
This skin could be a little technical.
Yeah, a
Using
little bit.
Mari.
Is rigging technical?
I'd say so. You guys have it? I think it's tedious.
No,
Maybe not like.
you have it the same time as us. The TV
Oh,
too.
you guys have it
On a
Sunday.
Sunday.
Monday.
Oh.
You'll find it on Friday.
Friday mornings? That's better than
Oh,
the
when do you
Sunday
have
mornings I
Do you have
know.
Sunday mornings?
I
Friday.
thought I have that. Dang it.
For dynamics. Yeah. I will start tomorrow morning. Good shit. Okay, we started. We started.
warm in here, man. Ball.
Let's see. What might you like here? All right, that's warm, warmish. All right, here. Turn this off for the time being. None. All right, so looking pretty reasonable for a short period of time. So tech notes, you know, she's filmic grain. Background does not have the same grain. So background's going to get it right after the blur. Grain node draw. Way too heavy by default. Hi, you like that, huh? Stay up here and chill. You can try a preset of 5218, which is a Kodak film stock. It's a smaller, finer film stock. Preset 5218. And then we're still gonna have to push it, right? So size and or intensity. So blue channel, intensity, relax. Good girl, good girl. And on a per channel basis until you feel like it's getting at a good place. Red, way too heavy. So filmically, the blue channel is almost always the heaviest. Red channel is almost always the lightest in terms of intensity and size. That's due to exposure. That the blue channel is the last to be exposed, therefore it should be slightly heavier. That feels better. That feels better. So a little green action. And light wrap, right? So right now, like that scarf's right in front of that sun. I've got my difference between my over and my add mix. I'm going with the add mix. I'm going to add light wrap before it. All right, so I'm going to say light wrap. A versus B pipe, and B pipe is going to go to the background. A is going to be our foreground. Okay. And it's a multiplier effect, so it needs some intensity. All right. One of these two. So it needs intensity to multiply it up. Diffuse is the size of the crawl across that surface. And I tend to go bigger and broader, but I also want to blur the background more. So what is that going to do is take the background and more broadly crawl the hot sources, right? So right now it's emulating the idea that the sun at its hottest part, or luminance at its hottest point, is going to bloom at the edges, basically. You can override this by saying disable, and then every edge is going to just get washed with a color adjacent. But we're going to go more accurate and increase the intensity so you can see it. I'm going to go a little bit broader with my sources and then go way more subtle with my light wrap, maybe in that neck of the woods. Maybe we'll bump saturation a bit to counteract that intensity. You happy? So grain and light wrap. Alright.
Where did that V pipe go to?
B pipe is your background. So it's your background and your foreground, much like a merge. So basically it's taking the luminance of the background and mushing it and blooming it over your edges, right?
Where is it piped to though? On
The background.
Oh.
So I've dropped a little dot. So it's coming off of the sum result of my scanline render. So match your grain. Give yourself a little bit of light bloom, light wrap. Take her real quick. So play with that for a second, then I'm gonna get into this reconcile. You guys warm or cold? Warm. That's we suffer. Okay, so reconcile 3D. So I want to drive. Let me just throw down a default lens flare. Flare. Don't lose that ball though. So look how glorious the default lens flare is. This multi-penta is actually so if I go to presets and say multi-penta, maybe flare multi. There you go. That's not too bad. Again, if I adjust my position like this is the sun, you're going to start to see it dance in this regard. And you can trick this out a little bit. We're going to start with just R&Ding on this because it's pretty light. But I need to parent this, or I would need to track this to kind of mimic the movement of the camera and where the sun is with this 2D data. Now, of course, I have a 3D solve, great, but I need to translate that somehow back into 2D data. So check this out. This is how we're going to get there. So the last thing we're going to hit is a node called Reconcile 3D. So Reconcile 3D transform. 3 pipes, an image pipe, a camera pipe, and an axis pipe. So image, it's going to go to scanline render. Camera, obviously the camera. And the axis is going to get its own unique axis positioned by us, the user. There you go. Axis, 3D axis. Okay, so let me hide the rest of this stuff here. So how this works is you hop into 3D world space. Whoa, look at that. Default. Here, where am I at? What's going on here? What's up and what's down? Here, sure. Camera, yes. Okay, cool. Now I get my bearings. Okay, so right now, this camera's in at the origin. Okay. Also, what just came in also at the origin is this axis. I'm going to call this axis, instead of 2, I'm going to call it axis flare. Flare. Okay, so I know which is which. So my goal is to kind of push this out, basically at the sunset. Right? So way out here at the sunset to make this work. So right now, as I mentioned, it's in at the axis origin, and I want to grab it and oops, not my fucking camera. Control Z. Hide my camera. Axis 1 goes away. Flare. There we go. So I'm grabbing it and mushing it out to the distant horizon, with a goal of kind of mimicking it where the sun position would be. So it looks like it's going to be over here. And further out a bit on Z. That's probably about right. Somewhere in that neck of the woods. Dink. Dink. There we go. So basically on my big sky dome diorama there, I positioned it and mushed it out where that hot spot of the sun is. If I hop into my camera now, that looks pretty damn good. Hey, I'm talking. Lock your aspect ratio one more time and hit play to demo it and see if that's going to work for you as a hotspot, and I believe it will. All right, so last step is I've kind of positioned it. So it's going to look at this to drive what the data is going to be. It obviously knows what the camera's doing. The last step is to go into the Reconcile 3D and say, create keyframes. Right? And it's going to say, would you like to execute it? And you want to say globals, 1 to 78 frames, and continue. And go. And basically, it gives you exactly that. So if I hop back out, here, tab, there's my 2D data right now, output, scanline render, and it's a pretty good representation exactly stuck to the camera data. Now I want to parent or link that to my flare. Right? So flare, here's my 2D XY output, here's my flare XY positional data. Control click to create a dynamic link, drag with a left mouse control drop. Now if I look at it here and hit play, it's magically animated exactly where that lens flare is. Okay, so now
That step. Can you repeat that step?
the last step, yeah,
How did you get like this
Control-
flare?
Control Z zoom. I tabbed in the word flare. So, flare.
No, but how did you get the line of flares? Because I only have one now.
The expression. What is it?
Like the, the circle, like you had like.
Yeah, so this boring blob, which will parent right now, to this guy. Control click, drag and drop. Right there. So note the expression link being created. Hit play. Not terribly interesting, but there it is. Under presets, there's a bunch of different options. Now, if you kept creating and kind of splitting out multiple and building it much like that script I just showed you, you could probably get something decent. So multi-pento is what I did. There's this globe, quote-unquote glow balls, many brights, symmetry 4. There's a bunch of hoo-ha going on here. Looks like I killed it all. Reset all. Multi-penta. All I want is multi-penta. And I want to link it to my XY output of Reconcile 2D. Bam. And there's a lot that you can kind of play around with and make this different and cooler and chroma spread and separation and trick it out. But it just needs kind of a lot to, the offsets, you really miss those offsets until you start to deal with something like this. Yeah. But the default will work fantastic. And let's do a little of this action on top of it. And let's see. Oh, wait, this works. And it's just a little subtle bit of lens aberrations on top of it. Just so that one didn't work somehow. Interesting. Hey, stop crying. Or you're not coming back. There we go. Hey, what'd I say? No. Did you get it that time, or do you want me to
No.
repeat one more time?
Yeah, repeat
The whole process, sure.
thanks.
Okay, so did everyone get reconciled data for step one, or still have problems? Everyone's put there. Okay. So the next step is to link it, right? So check this out.
I didn't get the reconcile 3D right.
Okay. So I'm gonna go through it one more time. Knock it off. Reconcile 3D. Image, camera, and an axis. All right, so go through this. Right, those 3 elements, and then I want to find axis 2, my 3D world space. Get into default camera, and kind of pan around. Currently, it's here, and I'll move it out, axis 2. Right, and align it to the hotspot of the sun, basically. Push it out on Z. Nudge it over, nudge it over. That looks pretty good. To check it, I'm going to jump into my camera. Oh yeah, there it is. Cool. So basically just moving a 3D access node in world space. That work? We all good? The last step in this process is to calculate that data, right? So you want to say, create keyframes. Boom. And it says, would you like to execute? Make sure you're on global, not input, and then let her rip. Boom. That's going to gather your data. Okay. The next step is to dynamically link with expression link. I'm going to do a brand new lens flare. Flare. All right. And I'm going to, here's my reconcile 3D XY data. Here is my positional data XY. I want to link with a control modifier, link XY data to XY data. And hit play. So now that default setting has been paired and is driving this new lens flare here. The option I chose was under presets, flare, multi-penta. There you go. That work? Still.
So you
Is it? Does you have an expression link connecting it? Do you have data here, changing each frame? I'll walk around to see what you guys got. So from here, once you get this going, we're good to go. Last things is, once you get this, of course, you want to crop it and write it to disk and be done with it for the day. So crop and reformat, right? Always a good practice. And then write to disk. I'm going to render to my Z drive. Nuke renders. Lesson 1 I created already. Of course, you can create a folder, as you guys probably know by now. And again, whatever you want to call it, lesson 1. I'm put in my login name as well as a comp. V001. I'm just going to say .mov. Give it a second, and then you're going to get Apple ProRes. I'm going to choose H.264. That's a good one to render to. And then, for purposes of the semester, drop everything into student drop. So if I go to instructor, let's see here. I have Titan Serve, class files. Hello. Where are you at? Come on. Class files, student drop, Martin Hall. We are on Saturday. New folder. So this is ADV comp. The day is Saturday. New folder. M Hall. So put a folder in here, and then you can drop your daily exercises that we render here. That's fine. And then walk around and take a look. Let's figure out what's going on. Then is it double click on it? Great. Try it one more. Input, is it okay? There we go. There, now it's fixed. There it goes. Okay. Oh, send us the eyeball thing. Okay. Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's better not to do it. Well, the thing is, you really don't want them to come through in your final comp. So again, like as I mentioned, it's a combination of everything, meaning that you're still seeing a little bit. So yeah, a little bit of keying for sure. So whatever reasons. So it's green suppress. So you want it. So this is one you want to do. You want to green suppress in red. See that? to revisit.
It's only if I could free up a whole day would I switch.
Let's do this. This shit.
I don't go outside usually, so.
Revisit this. And also,
That's what I had last semester. Yeah. So that's when I'm like,
oh wait,
I'm
no.
gonna do
That's
it
not
Sunday,
revisit.
I just feel like that.
I would, just try this one more time with that.
Christine was in the class.
It's much
Oh,
better.
we have to do it. There's another section.
You want, try midtones and push it, not just brightness, but push some more red into here.
Hmm?
Just like get yourself done whenever you're here, pretty much.
Or I just have like, I wanted
Why is it hot?
switch sections of classes.
Why is it
so
coming
I
up?
can get entire days off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe not.
Instead of like one at like 4 o'clock or something.
Yeah.
Nothing they
And
do.
like one started at 7 p.m.
Yeah, same. Yeah. Pretty much.
Usually, literally, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
So,
It's a weird mentality.
and
You
the
know?
same with like the 7 p.m. classes.
I just know it
Like,
sucks.
I do dinner super early or
Industrial love.
late.
Industrial love,
I
baby.
have to leave my house
All
at
right.
6, and I don't want to be shut in the face at 5:45. So I think that's fine. And I'm like, oh, it's so early. I'm not going to sleep for 6 hours.
So,
Exactly, so I'm not home yet.
Matt's Bunch is in it where I had transparency areas in her skin issues, right?
It'll
So,
be a little different now.
yeah, your key, I just revisit the key. You hit something that pulled in way more detail than me. So I just try resetting it and starting over. Just reset the whole thing and do one more time and see. Because you're pulling in way too much in. You hit something that was wrong and just redo it. Yeah, and this goes the process again. Yeah, you're already there. All you gotta do is do your first selection. Hit A for same thing, shift this again, and then keep building it. But you hit something wrong, obviously, and it pulled in way more edge than you needed. Not that good. Yeah, then so start with that, and then clean background noise, clean background noise. Sample it. Nope, don't do that. Why? Because it's red. That's probably what you were fucking with. You're trying to get there, and then it's like, oh, you want a key outer skin tone? No, because it's red as well. So, but yeah, look at the raw plate though, and it has like this weird, just like that hit A up here.
Oh, sure.
It's got, literally has a weird thready bit, right? So,
I keep
just
hitting
punch it.
shit.
That's fine.
Yeah, go with it. And then work through it again. Oh, this fucking heat. Right? The easy thing is just debug it one at a time. Just throw this to viewer, hit one, and there's no object, hit A. Are you in the middle of your frame range? Back by the middle of the shot. Just keep going down here. Just keep going step by step until it breaks. And see where you might have fucked up your key. Locked. Lab 7 is hot as fuck. Text. find it?
It's like not even the first one has it alpha.
Well, okay, so. Alright, so.
Both foreground and background.
RGB is just show me the green screen. Just show me the place structure. One, hit A here. Okay. And look at it here, throw it to the viewer. One, hit A here. Just delete it. Nope, you always start with background. Control click there. Let's go through that process one more time and then finish. Lovely out here. Shit, in here. All right. So, finish this thing up and you're good. I'm gonna peel off here now because it's hot as fuck in here, and get out of here. But looks like you guys got it. A couple of you guys got glitches, but work through it. You get, I think hopefully you get the idea. If you have questions coming back in next week, we'll hit them then. Otherwise, I'm gonna peel off to here. It's too fucking hot, man. Can't even, I just want to punch thermostats at this point. Here. Here. Attendance. Okay. All right, see everyone next week. You got it. Melanie, Constantine. Present. Tom is here. Jonathan is here. Anand is here. Present. Oops. Yeah, everyone present. Boom. Quit. There you go. And if you want to apply it to those other, play around with those other lens flares, they work great, but are heavy. And too heavy to work in this fucking heat, so peel off. Here. Sign out.